Welcome, guys. Welcome to our first edition of the podcast. Place is Profit. This podcast is fully made by Space Hunters. We're going to know about Space Hunters in a bit. I am John, or as we call it here in Brazil, Joao. And we have a table full of very important people to introduce you. So I'm just going to send it to Maria to introduce herself.
Hello, guys. My name is Maria Luisa. I'm the business representative of Space Hunters. I've exchanged some messages with Robert through email, but it's an honor to actually be here and hear what he has to say about his background, different ways of doing business, and the challenges of bringing business to the U.S.
Awesome. Francisco?
Hello, my name is Francisco. In Brazil, also Francisco, and I'm the CEO of Space Hunters. I was one of his founders, so I developed this company since scratch, since idea. Our main goal in this company is to help business entrepreneurs and developers to understand better the city and how the city can change the way they see it. Of course, my goal here in this podcast is to deliver some of my experience, some of my ideas, and also some of the things that I can add about location, about making business abroad. But the star here is Robert that is with us. So please.
Hello, everybody. Bob Gangi. Roberto, if you want to go that far, but I think just Bob or Robert's fine. I started a company a little while ago and how to do business in the U.S. How to soft land, how to find opportunities, what the right activities might be. And, as we proceed through this discussion, then happy to share what I know.
Awesome. This podcast name, is Place is Profit. We're going to talk about business and how location actually affects business, which is our main specialty right here at Space Hunters. And, to begin, we have a very special guest, as he already introduced himself, in Bob. I'm going to call you Bob, right? It's a little bit better. And, people are curious, Bob. Who is Bob? This is, a very philosophical question. But if you could talk, and just talk about yourself, your information, your values, just introduce yourself a little bit in a longer way.
Yeah, so I live in Northern Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. It's a very transient area, so it's I like to say that I'm one of the few natives from around here. Know the area very well. It's probably one of the I think it's ranked in the top 5, and historically in the top 5 places to do business in the U.S. So, I went to school locally, I went to college locally, I got my master's locally. And let's see, a little background. I was a commercial banker for 20 years, including 5.5 years at Citibank. Before that, I ran 2 ad agencies that were focusing in the pharmaceutical space. So moving product into doctors' offices, how do you reach them? What's the right messaging and packaging? I did that for 13 years, but it was, migraine medications and vaccines and anti-cholesterol medications, all the usual stuff that people take every day now. And it was interesting how I met my wife. She works for the U.S. Department of Justice and in their, what they call the vaccine litigation division. So on our first date, which was a blind date, I got a chance to, her father and my sister hooked us up. We started talking. Before we knew it, I was all about vaccines because we were trying to get doctors to understand why. And she was talking about the backside of vaccines. And so oddly enough, that was our one of many connections which we found, but a weird one in the scheme of things. But
the good thing is that you probably have a lot of subjects to talk about, right? It wasn't a boring first meeting.
No, it was actually a very lively first date, and she still remembers what she wore. God bless her. I don't remember what I was wearing, but it was the middle of summer. It was the day after her birthday, so it was obviously 26 years later we're still together. So that's been a good start.
Awesome. Usually women remember a little bit better than men, special dates and how they were wearing we usually wear everything, anything it's in our closet, and it's okay. So
Yeah, I remember because my wife paid to meet me in the first time because I was making a course about entrepreneurship for architects, and she paid to make this course. And
you
I
were
know
the
what
teacher, right?
yeah,
You were teaching it.
I was teaching. I was one of the advisors in this course because I'm an architect and also I'm an entrepreneur. And I remember what I was wearing because we have a photographer there that was taking photos, and of course we have a photo of me. So
And
I
the first day?
always kept that because I always remember, and I just had 2 shirts in that time, so it was the red one or the green one, so it's very easy.
Awesome. I actually met my girlfriend in a party, and I actually used to wear the same outfit to every party. So
That's good then.
it's easy to
It
wear.
was your go-to look, right? That was the one where you felt most confident.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Out of all of the things you just said, something just popped up. We talked about, states for goods, for good states for businesses, and talking about West Virginia, actually where you are. Some states pop in mind about big tech companies like California. This is a state actually in a very controversial state right now, stage of their political and, business way. We'll talk about Texas as well. Texas is a state that's growing a lot economically. But why West Virginia? Why do you think it's the 5th best state for businesses right now?
Well, actually, it's Virginia.
Virginia,
So
sorry.
West Virginia is good. West Virginia is mostly like a mountain state. They do lots of coal and natural resources. Virginia is it's got a broad base. I mean, it's I'd say I'll give you some reasons. One of the reasons why I like living here, you're 2 hours from the beach, you're an hour from the mountains, you're an hour outside of Washington, D.C., where there's lots of things to do, and that's sort of on the social side. But the federal government's 20 miles away from where I am right now. And, 38 to 40% of the businesses in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia all do business with the federal government. So think of anything that has to do with it, technology and services and defense, and you name all the top companies, they all have their headquarters here. It's also, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Northern Virginia, probably 20 minutes down the road, an area called Ashburn, Virginia, 74% of the world's data goes through Ashburn, Virginia. So when you talk about how information moves through, it starts in Ashburn and then goes everywhere else.
Well,
so it's crazy. Data centers they're everywhere. They're in the area called Loudoun County, now Fairfax County, and all the larger counties around here are putting them in because they take up their good tax revenue. They attract companies who want to be, the closer you are to the data center, the faster your data is processed. So if you're doing big data analysis or cybersecurity or anything along those lines, the closer you are to the data center, the faster you get responses back to your clients. So, it's a fun fact about Northern Virginia that many people know. In this area it's the second most business associations in the country. So because the federal government's right here. So it's another one of those, why would you want to be here? That's another reason why you want to be here.
Yeah, I talked with some community leaders of Virginia, mostly from near Washington D.C. area, about Alexandria. It's Virginia, right? And they told me a lot of things that I really don't know. I really don't knew about Virginia, and lots of things that you said. Some of those things they say to me was something that you said about how they are connected with the public government, with the federal government mostly. And most of the associations are in Virginia. Most of the companies' headquarters sometimes are in Virginia because of the proximity of the federal government. So it's pretty interesting. We didn't know that. We didn't know that much here in Brazil about that, because here in Brazil, being very, very honest, when we say about the United States, we always think about Florida because we have a lot of Brazilians there. We think about New York because we have a lot of Brazilians there as well. Massachusetts, because it's the biggest Brazilian colony outside Brazil in the United States,
Boston, right?
Boston, Massachusetts, and California because everybody like big techs. But we have a wild, a lot of communities, a lot of states in the United States are very strong economically, and most of the countries, most of the population outside the United States didn't see it. Like Colorado is a strong economy as well. Texas, as you said, Robert, Bob, as you said, is Virginia itself. And most of the people, most of the countries outside the United States didn't saw Virginia, didn't see these countries, didn't see these states. Sorry. And what, in your opinion, would be the other four states that is interesting outside Virginia, besides Virginia, that you think it's interesting for companies, interesting economically speaking right now?
Well, it depends on the industry. I mean, we can go through and, I mentioned that the greater Washington area, which is Maryland and DC, Washington, DC, and Virginia, number of government contractors are here. But if you want to do anything in the space industry, Alabama, an area called Huntsville, Alabama, is a very big area because they've got Space Force down there. They have a large contracting community supporting that. If it's anything with the Navy, Southern Virginia, Norfolk is the largest port on the U.S. On the eastern side of the U.S. Where San Diego is where the main area is on the West Coast. If it's going to be Air Force related, Colorado is the right place to be because Colorado Springs is where the Air Force Academy is. So it really just depends on where you want to be. Boston's great because they have a high technology sector that they've really built out. And they've built it around the Massachusetts, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So they've created these large pockets of technology firms there. So it really just depends. I mean, you can go to, Hartford, Connecticut. So Connecticut is a very small state, East Coast, upper, like what they call Northeast quarter. They're big on insurance. Insurance companies mostly are there, or they're in Missouri. So it just depends. I mean, if you want to do business with Walmart, you go to Kentucky, you go to Louisville. If you want to do anything Disney related, it's either Florida or California. So it really depends on what type of business you want to bring in and where the higher concentrations of companies that are, potential for you, where they might be.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about, the MIT, and earlier you also talked about the tax difference between each state, because, every state in the United States works kind of like a country, for us foreigners.
Yeah.
Because, even the counties itself, they kind of work, together, but separately at the same way. And I was really curious to know your opinion being there and, living the whole life there about what makes, a state get better resources in economic way. Is it the colleges? Is it the taxes? There are more things that we are not talking about that also influence economically where you're going and how the state's growing.
Yeah, great question. So universities are somewhat of a driving force, but everywhere, I mean, we're fortunate to have a very reasonable, if not low, unemployment rate across the country. Some states are better than others. So there's a demand for good talent. So I give you an idea. I'll keep talking about Virginia only for a moment. That Amazon put their second headquarters here in Virginia, and why? Because the Pentagon is here, which is where every defense decision is made, and it's the second largest office building in the world. It's huge. So everybody coming out of the military, we've got you have a guaranteed workforce right here in Virginia. That's why Amazon decided to do that. So when you talk about the roles of universities, it's a combination of where the workforce is coming from. Universities, technology areas. I mean, already talked about Silicon Valley in California, how they're very heavy on technology. And a lot of software engineers go out there, but it's so expensive to live there, and the taxes are so high that people are moving out of California. A lot of the companies are starting in Boston, starting in Virginia, starting in Denver, in parts of Texas, because we're talking about a 60 or 65% tax rate, which in California, all taxes altogether, that gets very expensive to have a company there. You know, when I was running one of my companies years ago, I was working with my brother. And by the way, don't work with your brother anymore in a couple of years because it gets weird after a while. But we're in Maryland. In Maryland, we're paying 58% tax rate. Well, why would I give 60 cents of every dollar I make to a state where I live in Virginia and he's in? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So those decisions come into play of having it working with a firm that understands tax rates, where the talent is, and where the business really is. Those are the three main factors, I think.
Awesome.
Got
I
that.
actually, this about California is something that we were talking about in our office. Francisco is really, you know, it really researches a lot about the U.S. So he sends us a lot of videos in our messaging group, and he sent us a video about California and the enterprises there are leaving and the streets there are empty or full of things that shouldn't be in violence.
In San Francisco.
In San Francisco, yeah. I actually have my sister right now. She lives right now right down the Santa Monica Pier in LA, in Los Angeles, and she actually works for L'Oreal, which is a international brand. She worked at the headquarters in Paris, and she wanted to be an expat and actually work in the U.S. Was kind of divided between the New York office. They have an office in New York and an office in California. And she couldn't go to the New York office. She had to go to the California's office because people were migrating to the New York's office. There wasn't a line of people wanting to go to the California's office. And so she got her spot there, but she's thinking of moving to New York very soon.
Yeah.
Well, they're 50% of the homeless people in the U.S. live in California.
They have a migration of homelessness to go to California because of some politics, as far as I know. Like people from Texas, homeless from Texas, go to San Francisco. That's a very interesting thing to.
It's going to become a city of the homeless.
Exactly.
Mostly.
They pay $1,600 a person. If you're homeless, you get $1,600 a month, plus a cell phone, plus free food. What you don't get is shelter, but they'll buy you tents. They'll buy you paraphernalia that you can use. There's a whole bunch of reasons why California is changing its profile. I don't want to get too detailed and political.
No, don't worry.
And Robert, it's not a surprise that a lot of businesses are actually closing in California, because with my experience, I visited California 2 times and things were very expensive. For people to actually buy a product or a service was very hard. And with business, it works the same way. Things are very expensive to open a business, and that's why they end up closing. And as we can see, they've been closing for the last few years.
Yeah, there's a map I saw several weeks back where they talked about the exodus from the high tax states and where people are going. They're going to Colorado, but Colorado is almost tapped out right now from be able to accommodate the people and have the infrastructure to handle them. They've been going to Nevada. Nevada is another nice big state, but very few big cities, and all those cities are reaching their point of capacity. So then you go to Texas, and you go to Austin or Dallas or San Antonio, and they don't have their corporate tax rates are very low. Florida, their corporate tax rates are very low. So there's a lot of reasons why, if I'm a business owner, I've got to make what the decisions right for me. Where do you go? Find the talent, good favorable tax, and then enough businesses in my area that makes sense for me to to being near them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's crazy. When I was in Florida, like in April to May, one of our business partners that said that they have so high demand for population and for schools in Florida, mostly Miami-Dade County, that the schools are overload of people. They have too many students. They don't have space for that many students. That the mayor of Miami is paying a fee for you to take your kid and put him in a private school. But the private school are also full because they don't have space for kids anymore. They are building new schools there because the demand is so high in that city. So that's crazy to think about it if you think that the school is full of people.
Yeah, and a state
Yeah.
also needs the infrastructure to actually grow. This is
We
something
do.
that I was really impressed by my time in Texas. I told you earlier I actually lived in Texas for about 6 months. It was a short time, but I could get to some conclusions. And the infrastructure I found in Texas beats the infrastructure I find in the best parts of Brazil and even in the best parts of South America, for example. The highways, the interstates. I was impressed even by the 18-wheelers. I didn't see 18-wheelers so big, so long in the United States as I saw it here in Brazil.
And this is something we're talking this morning about, right? How different the businesses are in the U.S. Compared to Brazil, because here our power of purchase is much lower, right? If you work and you make a minimum wage, you're not able to purchase things as you are able to purchase when you're in the US. So the purchase power is much higher in the United States, and people are way more likely to buy things and services because of this.
And that also speaks to infrastructure, because enterprises here in Brazil have a problem with infrastructure. The government has a problem with infrastructure, and states and companies in the US have a better way to actually be in different states and work for different states easier. I mean, it's easier for you to have an office, for example, in Miami, like we have, and then work in every single state that there is in the United States and even in the whole world, than it is for you to have an office in Brazil and work in every single state in the United States. We had to open an office in Miami so that we could actually be with the American market.
And here's something that I would like to ask Robert. That one thing that here is like we are playing the hard mode in the video game. Like it's very hard for us to open a business. The market's not. We don't have as many capital as we would like, but in the same way, it's not that easy to go to another country. It's not that easy to go to the United States, for example, because the rules can be easy. The taxes is much, much more lower in the United States compared to Brazil. But we also know a lot of histories about Brazilians here that go to the United States and broke, like in a year, because they think that is pretty easy. It's like taking candy from a kid to open the business. So Robert, your experience about people from abroad that you know that go to United States, how common is for you to see people that open a business, think it is very easy and broke up and didn't understand, think that Americans are very naive person that, okay, I go well in India, I go well in China, so United States is easy mode in the game. And it's not like this. It's not. It's a completely different culture. It's a completely different market. What's your opinion about that?
I think the hard part is, the United States is so large and so diverse that you expect by moving there that within a couple of phone calls or 6 months you have an impact, right? That's the hard part. Is there's a it is the land of opportunity, right? And we all can do that. It just sometimes takes a little longer, right? So that's why, when you work with an economic development authority at a county, and Joel, you talked about that earlier, that there are states and there are counties. Everybody's trying to bring their businesses to these areas, but they can only go so far. They could just say, look at our pretty buildings and look at the people we have here, and that's about as far as they can go. They won't take that next step and connect you to businesses. So I think when a lot of companies fail, when they're coming from overseas to the US, they don't get the business first. they plant the flag, and then expect people to knock on their door. It doesn't work that way, right? That even if you put a fairly good marketing campaign together, it takes a while, right? I mean, social media has changed how people are aware of your businesses, and it takes what used to be, eight views of a name of a company before it's stuck. Now I think it's up in the 30s. How do you do that, right? How do you get that out there so that way you can find those business opportunities sooner than later? I think that's what there's a high expectation, there's high opportunity and high expectation, but they've got to, I don't say, temper the expectations with how long it'll take to get traction.
Yeah. And I think that relates a lot to earning the trust of people who are there in the US. For example, in my personal experience when I lived in the United States, it took me a couple months to be able to make friends there, because people are like more likely to be your friend if you earn their trust, right? I think the same thing we can relate to business. If you go to the US, if you have a company that they don't know about, first of all, you're going to have to show that you do a good work, you do a good job, and you're going to have to earn their trust. And a few weeks or months later, then things can change. But this is the first step, I believe.
It is. And that's the hardest part. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, with my consulting practice, I told you I was a recovering banker. I stopped. But I set my practice up. I got my limited liability official tax ID number on March 12th of 2020. So we all know what happened a couple of days later, right? So everything the world changed a little bit. But over that 3-year period, it's a constant activity of making sure, because people know me, right? I like to think that I get along with a lot of people and they know me, I like them, and they know what I've done in my past. But now I'm doing something different. And so they have to get comfortable with saying, well, Bob, you're a great guy, but what do you know about this? Well, I know about this because I've done these things. And now I have clients and I can show you what I've done. That's for me, who's born and raised here. Imagine being somebody new coming in. The service or the product has to be so good that you go, oh my gosh, I've got to have that. But you've got to have somebody who's willing to do that with you first, a couple of times, so that way they can say, you know what, Space Hunters is the best thing ever, and here's why. You know it is, and the people that you work with do, but now you're coming to a brand new market. How are these? It's going to take a while, right? You're right. There's a trust build that comes into play, and once that happens, then you get a little bit of I call it a hockey stick growth, right? You kind of move along like this, and all of a sudden it turns into a hockey stick. And takes off. It takes a while to get to that point. So it's about patience. It's about constant hustle, but it's constant attention to showing people why you're good and what you can do for them.
Yeah. And businesses actually have to be ready to, invest time and money now and actually, make profits in the future. And there's a gap between, the investment and the actual, exponential profits. And
Yes.
a lot of businesses, fall through that gap and can never recover from that.
Or they don't have the. I'll say it's a combination of two different kinds of capital. There's, capital, which is the money itself to go through and carry you for a while. But it's also the sweat capital that you have to put into it. You've got to be willing to continue to do that to a point where somebody says, I get what you do. I trust you that you can deliver on what you say you can do. Now let's go do it. So, I'm working with a group in the UK. I call them a referral partner. And all they do is they shake the bushes of companies throughout Europe to say, do you want to do business in the United States? And so I've seen almost 100 companies over the last 8 months. I'd say I can count on two hands how many people were ready to do it. They think they are. And then you have a conversation and they're like, oh, I just don't have that kind of money. Well, I thought it would be easier. No, you've got to be ready. And there's a lot of things to consider. It's not hard once you make that decision. but it all starts really with getting new business, because that then helps provide the good capital, gives you money to go through and put into the effort to then complement the sweat capital. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Makes total sense. It's the
Yeah.
beginning of every company. It's like this. You have
Yeah.
to make your way through. You have to make you being knowing. I know because I found my Space Hunters here from my scratch, from an idea, and what we do is pretty different from everything that everybody knows here. And we are in the southern Brazil. We are not in the center of the country, economically speaking. So it's very tough because in Brazil we have a saying like, norther you go, easy is to talk, is to know people, easy is to get connections. In the southern Brazil, people are much more colder. We have a lot of Germans, Italians here, so we are not as easy speak, easy going as people think it is. So it's very hard. So when you want the trust of those people, mostly in the countryside of our state, you have their trust, and when you have the trust, they blindly trust you, they blindly hire you, and they recommend you. So I kind of understand that because United States is similar for what we are where we are in Brazil. Like people have to know you, people have to understand what you do, people have to see that what you do have value, and most of all, they have to see that what you do you trust in your own business. Like, I am not here because of your money. I'm here because I can change your way. I can change your business. I can make your business more profitable. And showing that, people will trust. But the problem is that most of the companies that we know that go to the United States think, okay, easy money. Dollar is a strong currency, so let's go there. Let's make money. Let's get rich. And that's not the way. You have to see that America have its culture. America have its ways. You have to see they have to trust in their feelings, their guts. And when we go there to make business better, to make profitable business, and to sell your service, not to earn money, to not make money, the things are a little bit easier. But as you said, Bob, take time. It take time, take months, take probably years to people to, as you say, to get in their turning point, to create critical mass, and your business to grow easily. So it's kind of like open a business new all over again.
Exactly.
And most of the entrepreneurs don't have this patience to make all over again because they already passed through it. Oh no, I don't want to make this anymore.
Yeah, and there's we can talk culture too. I mean, it's throughout the U.S. There's different there. We talked about the concentrations of certain businesses and industries, but there's a cultural difference too. I'll throw an example out. I worked for Citibank for 5.5 years. Lots of international clients. That was a lot of fun. And then I left there to go run the Northern Virginia area for the largest family-owned bank in the United States. They're based out of North Carolina. Well, the pace of activity in North Carolina is very different than the pace of business in Northern Virginia. I mean, it is, even if you drive through Virginia, go to Southern Virginia, the pace of the activity is going to be from, okay, let's go do this. We're doing this. What's next? All right, this is good. Let's get off the phone. To, okay, how are you? Let's talk about your family and let's go through and it's just a different pace. And so that culture tends to change how you approach each of those areas. So I found when I was working with the ownership of the bank that I had to slow my pace down of conversation. I had to explain things in a different way because it was so foreign to them. They're used to a certain pace, and then there's Northern Virginia pace, which is going to be a lot better and a lot faster. So that happens too when you go to Texas versus Wyoming versus California or Boston. Every place is going to have its own rhythm of business, and so it's understanding that too. And that's probably the hardest thing to figure out.
And we can
That's
see
that
that
trust building.
And we
Yeah,
can see
sure.
that difference in pace between countries as well. I see that I've lived in 2 years in Greece and 4 years in the US, and things are very, very different from one country to another. In the US, things are pretty quick. You know, if you need a document ready, you're going to have that in an instant. In Greece, it takes a few days, sometimes a few weeks. So it's very different from one
Yeah.
country to another, especially the consumer behavior and everything. For example, I in my time there in Greece, I used to go to the coffee shops, to the cafeterias, and people tend to sit down and drink coffee for hours, talk about life. And this is in weekdays, not even on weekends. And in the US, this is very rare to happen. You know, in the US, people are just gonna go through a drive-through and grab a coffee and go to work. In
Yes.
Europe is totally different, especially in Greece, because I've lived there and I've known.
We were there. We were there last year, and we would sit down for dinner, and they would show up 10 minutes later and then get your order, and then they would go into the kitchen. It'd be 35 minutes before you got your food. If you went 10 minutes without getting a waiter in the US, you're standing up and you're looking for the manager, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's a different pulse. But again, it gets back to that trust building. When you're working with a company, what are the things you need to consider to build that trust, right? Part of it's going to be how you present yourself. How it's going to be materials that you give them, the frequency of your communication to them. All these things come into play in sort of building that trust. And I've been through enough sales courses where there's a strategy when you're sitting across from a prospect and you have this great discussion and you know what you want to tell them, right? You've prepared, you've got all your benefit statements ready to go, and you know that your product is the best thing they're going to see. Some people, they want to say, tell me what it is right now and I'll make the decision. Others, you spend 2 hours and you have to listen and you have to wait and be patient and, talk about their family and their vacations and their children and move back around. And you may never talk in your conversation about what you want to talk about, but you have to understand that that's going to happen sometimes. Again, it's a cultural difference. That's talking to a CEO versus a CFO versus a director. They all have different interests in mind. So when you want to do business, the reason why a lot of people fail is that they think that they can have that same conversation with 4 different people and it'll have the same outcome. It doesn't work that way, right? I'm sure you guys have seen it as well, that when you have a conversation, you've got to know who you're talking to and what you think their interest might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, I'm I'm not a formal guy. I'm not a formal person, but yeah,
Very informal.
I'm very informal.
In the
but-
day-to-day work. it's
But
very informal.
when I talk with some clients, I have to suit up. I have to wear a good clothes. I have to talk very straight to the point. But have some clients, have some partners that, of course, I can say some jokes. I can say some funny things in the way, or I can say some things that are not related to work at all. As you said, Bob, you have to understand who you're talking.
And
So
some clients, you actually had to be in the US to actually talk to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember. This is something I actually was curious about, because I remember Francisco saying before he went to the first time to Washington, that there are people who agreed to talk to him, but only in person in Washington.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to schedule a video conference, a meeting. They really wanted to speak to you and shake your hand and know you and look you in the eye. And some businesses actually don't actually have the money or the time to be physically in the US, to
Yeah.
actually build the trust and being there and visiting the different enterprises, as you did visiting Washington and Florida.
Yeah, I believe it's kind of possible for you to open a business without being in the country, but it's much more harder because
Yes.
one thing is that you can show your work and the people, okay, you have a large portfolio here in the United States, so I can trust you. The other way is for you to meet people in person. Like we have one good partner in Florida that I met them personally, They don't speak English. They speak Spanish. That's hard for me because we speak Portuguese. Is not the same language. And
No.
was a very, very hard conversation because was a mess, the meeting, but was in person. I shake her hand. I understand her business. I understand what she needs. And now she's a very good partner. They make an alliance with us because they trust us. She saw me in the eyes and she say, okay, I'm from Venezuela and I understand you're from Brazil. I get what you're saying. I understand the business. I want to make business with you. But that's important to be in the place, be there, because you can see in the eyes of a person what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot see that by a video conference. But I can see by a video conference, by a lot of video conferences, and I can see by a lot of conversation, but take a lot of time, much more time.
Yeah. There's something about the face-to-face, the body language, the nervousness, whatever it might be that comes across. And, somebody use what I like as an interesting example of for instance, you came to the U.S., you met with some people, you got the pot boiling. Right? You got the water boiling really nicely. And then you go back. How do you keep that water warm? How do you keep that pot boiling? It may be another 2 trips. It may be connections. There's something else that has to happen in that activity. It's not just doing a Survey Monkey or a constant contact email blitz. And what worked for you with that woman could be different than somebody you met in Boston, than somebody you might meet in California. So again, cultural differences, regional differences, lots of things come into play that you don't really think about when you go, oh, I want to go to the United States. Well, good for you. I want to go to Brazil and open up a business, but it's not going to be that easy, right?
No,
I would need people like you on the ground to help me through that. Help me understand the market and what it's like, the landscape is like there.
Yeah, and one of the problems about making a video chat, a video call, is because you never know if the person is wearing pants during talking. That's the problem. That's why people have trust issues.
We're all wearing pants because we're in the studio. So
Yeah.
But we don't know if Bob's wearing pants, so it's kind of an awkward situation. But
they're not matching my shirt, but I am wearing pants.
Okay, no, it's okay. But there's an actual client I was talking to Francisco earlier that told us that we should have had an American representative from the start that wasn't, working with space hunters in Brazil. That was only an American working with space hunters, but not a foreigner, an actual American. Not us being there, but having an American to talk to the American. Do you think this is a strategy that could work, for us or for businesses from abroad that enter the U.S., that not only being there physically, but having American power force, workforce in their enterprise?
I think the short answer is yes. There's a but, and the but is that the people who do this don't do it very well. They say they've got connections. They oftentimes don't have very many. You also take the risk that they're the person shaking the hand of the prospect instead of you. So they're buying from one more person that's separated from you. And are they the best representative of your culture, of your approach, of your business? So I say, yes, it's helpful, but it's finding the right person. For me, I think the right way to do it is make the connections not to an in-country representative, but to somebody who could be an advocate or a champion of your business to find other business prospective partners for you. Because then what you're doing is then all I'm doing is sort of getting the pot boiling a little bit, and then taking the you and that potential customer and putting them together. Then you can have that conversation. But if you have somebody who's again, you could have someone who says, yes, I know this market really well. I know all the players, but they're in Florida. Well, maybe I got to go to Colorado. We have to go to Texas or California. Now it gets very expensive. because now you're paying for their travel all over the US and you're trusting that they're going to represent you well. So it can become risky, and it's hard to find the right groups to do that. I know on the like retail side and the sort of the clothing department store space, there are companies that do that and do that very well. And they, because there are only, let's say 500 in the US that are of any size where they can do that. Well, they know them all. That's easy. But if you want to talk to somebody in aerospace and defense and they say they know everybody, or in the government contracting world, or in, let's say it's anything to do with the dental space, and your product approaches, there aren't enough people out there to do that because there are 35,000 dentists in the United States. You can't know them all. You can't know how to reach them all, right? So it just depends. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. Depends on the industry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with Space Hunters, we're actually, trying to find that out on the go, trying to find it as we grow in the US. And we have mostly business partners that are starting to build some bridges for us and start to open some markets for us. Francisco went there, physically spent mostly a month or over a month.
Mostly a month.
Mostly a month in the US, opening those doors. I really try from Brazil to keep the communication going. But as you said, it takes time. We're trying to build that trust through many different advisors that give us those advice and actually can represent and sell our business. Yeah. But nothing like Francisco talking to the client and Francisco going there. That was
because it also, if I may, your service is unique, right?
Yeah.
What you do, it's a very defined niche, so you can be more dependent on people to connect you to the right people than if you're coming up with you sell custom scarves. Oh goodness, that could go anywhere, right? Yeah. Or you've got a particular wearable device for tracking hypothyroidism or something. That's a huge market for you to go out to, and it's hard to find those people who have those connections. But for you guys, you're right. Working with the right people, there are fewer. You've got a more limited market opportunity. It'll be great once you get it, but there, let's say you go to the counties and states, you're 50, you're talking a couple thousand. That's different than 30 or 50,000. So you can work with people and get that. And for instance, you can cultivate that. Both of you guys can work together with partners to make that happen.
Yeah, and what I see the best way for a company is that a lot of partners say, okay, you have to live in the United States. Of course, it's in the plans. I already convinced my wife to go to live in the United States. So
that's the most important thing, right?
That's the easy part. That's the most hard part. Now it's just the easy part to have the visa, but that's the easy part to get. But the most interesting thing is that, of course, I can go to the United States, can get a visa. I'm European, so it's more easy for me. But if I just go there blindly and just, okay, now I'm going to find out what to do. That's the hard part, because I would just expend a lot of money, spend a lot of effort. What I wanted to, my intent here is to open up a U.S. market. Of course, I go there to understand a little better how the market works, to talk with some partners, to go to Select USA Summit. And the idea there was not to make money. The idea was there to understand a little better how the market works. Then I can generate and can create a partnership network. And this partnership network, I can test and I can validate the service. And with this validation and with this test, I can see, okay, now I can go to the US to reach this kind of market. And the easy way is that way here. Because without this travel, without this opening market, without this client that we already have, I don't have a clue. I didn't have a clue in the beginning of the year. What I can do, okay, I can try the same thing we have here in Brazil, or I can try a different approach. And now I can understand a different approach. I can understand who are the partners, who aren't, and so on. So that's the idea. I go like easygoing, one step at a time. And I guess that's the best advice I could do for someone that asks me what to do. Like, what do you think about it? Burning cash, burning money, and just try to make it happen, or try baby steps, one step at a time. I believe the smarter choice is like make in the beginning one step at a time, because the worst thing is that spend a lot of money in the wrong industry, spend a lot of money in the wrong channels, spend a lot of money in the wrong marketing strategies, because when you find out the right one, you just burn a lot of cash. You don't have the trust of your investors. You don't have the trust of your clients. You don't have the trust of our partners as well. I don't know. I see that way. Like we have like to analyze correctly the market, because as we all say that here, we are not in the United States, or the foreigner is not there. I can go to Italy. I'm Italian, but I don't know how Italians work. I know they don't drink cappuccino in the afternoon. I know that's a very, very serious thing for
Or
them.
in the case of Greece, Freddo espresso.
Yes. Yes. Or if you're dealing with Afghans, it's going to be tea, right? And it has to be green tea. They'll accept black tea, but it's got to be. It's like you're right. So oddly, cultural differences do come into play, but you're right. If you walk into it thinking that you've got the right message, and you don't, you got to spend a lot of money on running down a dead end road. And that's probably getting back to your original thought. Why do people fail? They fail because they're not prepared. They're not properly prepared. They haven't done enough research. They haven't worked with the right people to know that the best way to do it is to find somebody in country who does this, or that maybe it's going to be working with a channel partner or a national distributor. There could be different ways to do it, just depending on, what your product is and what your industry is. Again, for you guys, it made perfect sense to go through and create a network, and then build off of that.
Yeah, and we are in the easy mode in this industry, because what we can do remotely. We have clients from Dubai, from United Arab Emirates. We have clients from Philippines. We have clients from Germany, and what we can do everywhere in the world.
Did you explain what do we do?
Yeah, well, what do we do for those who didn't know what we do? We analyze the urban tendencies in a city to understand where you can have a higher profit and where you have higher success fee, just using location. But we don't use like geomart informations. We use the urban tendency of the city, using only its design. So that way we can analyze Dubai, and was a client that we sent the analysis last week. And we show this area of Dubai, like Oxide, is developing much more faster than the other regions of Dubai because of these tendencies here. And it's very interesting, because the fastest growing pace of the city was happening in some determined areas that our system was much more higher tendencies there. So it was very interesting this. So what I'm saying, as I can work everywhere in the world, the easy thing is to find clients in some way. The hard thing is to find partners and find people that trust us. We had some clients in California, we have some clients in Dubai, we have some clients in Florida, but the hard part is to create connections. So take a lot of time to make that. And that's something that we have to be used to it.
Because there's a lot of businesses to locate, because we solve location issues. So where to actually locate your businesses. There's a lot to locate, and there's a lot of different clients, type of clients that we could actually bring to the table and talk. You said last week, I remember, about the counties that we can actually work with that we don't work with in Brazil, because counties and states here in Brazil have too much bureaucracy to work with, tech enterprises that bring something new. So the government is, 2 or 3 steps behind the whole market in tech-wise, especially in Brazil. But in the United States, it's a little bit different. Counties actually invest to show that their areas are interesting for businesses.
Yeah, for those who are in the United States and want to understand a little better how Brazil is, think that California, if it was in Brazil, would be like the easiest place to make business in Brazil, California nowadays. So that's how Brazil is to make business, regulations and bureaucracy. So it's a lot of bureaucracy, it's a lot of regulations. So here the communities, the city councils don't have like this kind of entrepreneurship way to think. In the United States, I was very surprised when I was in the summit, and we have like 5 governors in my front, and they were speaking like they was in a bar, like speaking normally, usually like a normal people used to speak. They was making jokes with each other. And was like, me and the other Brazilian was like, what the hell is happening here? Like, the government in Brazil never would say this kind of thing. Like, they're making jokes with the Delaware governor, like, oh, how many companies have in Delaware? Offshore companies have in Delaware. And he has said a ratio of 2 to 1, like 2 companies per 1 inhabitant of Delaware. So that's very interesting. That's changed a lot the way you make business in the United States, because the government is much more pro-business than in most places of the world, not just Brazil, but not just Latin America.
And it becomes a client as well.
Yeah, they can be a client.
Yeah, I mean, it's spot on. I mean, we talked briefly about Select USA, which is a huge conference that the U.S. Commercial Service runs every year, and they make it sound like it's called FDI, foreign direct investment. Like, this is all about business. Well, it's really not. It's not about business. All the governors go there and they bluster and they talk about how great their states are, and they throw lots of money at big receptions. But the small business owner who wants to do business in the U.S., what they really need is to talk to other people. It should be one big networking event. So there are opportunities to come here to get a flavor for it. Those conferences tend to be expensive, and sometimes they end up not being as productive as you'd like them to be. You were fortunate that you're able to go to California and Florida and make some relationships with some people, but it started with somebody. Somebody introduced you, or you found them and made that connection. Select USA had 4,400 people. There's no way to make connections if you're with all the people you want to. So it just it depends on. Sometimes the strategy is go to a trade show, meet some people, make connections. Sometimes it's getting somebody, as you talked about earlier, Joel, about bringing in someone who speaks the language, who knows the area, and get them involved. And sometimes it's really just finding your first couple of clients and then building from there. You mentioned Delaware. Delaware is one of the friendliest places to set up a limited liability corporation. So it's either there or it's it's there or Montana, which is another nice big state that no one really knows about. But there are a couple of states where it's very easy to go and set up an LLC, and they make it purposely that way. North Carolina is now doing that, and they're saying we can get you a company set up in 2 days. All right, California, it's a week. You go to the Midwest, it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. And sometimes that's the county and sometimes that's the state. It just depends on how quickly they do it. Virginia is only between 2 and 4 days. So it just, it's interesting that just as you think about coming here, that's another consideration.
Yeah, that's interesting always to think about that. And what you said about Select USA is true. We go there because we are selected by the consulate of the United States in São Paulo. So they take us there, but it's not a very cheap event to go. It's not a very cheap summit to go. And for a small business or a tech business, it's not the best place for you to make connections, because most of the states they're looking forward to get industries and factories there, and most of the investors are looking for sometimes space industry. For aerospace industry, they are looking very looking towards this kind of industry, and a lot of Ukrainians industry as well. There are a lot of Ukrainians there, so there's something very weird. If you are Ukrainian there, you have a lot of opportunities. If you are like Brazilian or Philippines, you are like, okay, you're okay, but not that good. Because of you have a lot of politics involved there. So that's one thing that I saw, but was a good experience as well. I like that because the first time we have good connections. I got your connection through that, so was good. Just for that was okay. The cost was paid for.
You can start there and, you know, actually evolve that as you did traveling through Florida and through Washington and visiting different partners. So
yeah,
it's a good start.
Was awesome. Was a very nice experience. But what I'm trying to say is that if it wasn't for me to pay to go there, I didn't know if that worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very nice experience. I like personally. I love it. I love the experience. I love the people I connect there. I love the people I like that. And it was very interesting to see the differences in states, like going from Florida to Virginia to DC was a very different landscape, very different culture, very different people there. Was a little shocking for me because the mindset of the population is very different from one state to another. That's something that shocked me a little.
Going from one state to another in the US is like going from one country to another in Europe. The culture is totally different. The accents are even different. So it's it's unique.
I came back from Texas just you know, with a really preeminent Texan accent. I believe I've lost that along the way, but sometimes y'all just comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I remember very few words that I used to speak. You know, sound really like a Texan, like a cowboy from the movies. Today I believe only the y'all kept dragging in my head. So.
And if you go to like Georgia or Mississippi or certain parts of Florida, it's all y'all.
All y'all.
So it's everybody. All y'all is going to be a phrase that you use. So, and then you get to Northwest, they have it different. If I can, you talked a little about sort of opening factories, and we talked earlier about, you know, needing to have capital. And I'll put my old banker hat on for a minute and just talk about some of the challenges that I saw when you know, I was working for Citibank, and Citibank, obviously the largest bank, one of the largest banks in the world, great international platforms. I would see lots of small companies that wanted to go through and open up an office here in the US. Citibank wouldn't support them financially. They would open an account for them. It would take them a month to do it because they had to validate all the backgrounds, et cetera, of everybody who's part of the owner. And then, but they wouldn't finance it unless they were a large enough company where the parent company from whatever country was strong enough to support the debt that I call it a parent and a child, right? That the U.S. entity was going to need. So, you know, you talk about coming to the U.S. for a trade show, that's $25,000, $30,000 right there between flights, hotels, entertainment, whatever it's going to be. If you're going to do this on a regular basis, now you're making a pretty large investment. So you mentioned earlier, Joao, about counties having flexibility, which they do. They like to see you say, I want to build, you know, can we build a factory in your area? Sure, we could do that. We'll provide you incentives, cash incentives, tax incentives. We'll do everything. But what they don't do is help you finance it. The financing has to come from the parent company. So it becomes just another consideration when you do want to come to the United States. What is your goal? Is your goal short-term goal to get 3 clients? Is your short-term goal to start to buy land and build and put a plant, right? Or buy an existing one and convert? There's a lot of things to consider as well. And if it's anything that has to do with capital, where you have to have money to buy something, you either have it in your back pocket, or you have it within a company, the credit worthiness of your company to handle that expansion. So it's another obstacle to consider. Just as if I wanted to go and do business in Greece, right? I'd have to find the land. I'd have to work with the local folks there. And there's a lot of things that would go on. It would take 18 times longer because it's Greece, but that's sort of the idea. The U.S. would want you to build there, but they still have their regulations. I mean, one thing that came out of COVID is that every industrial building went to good use immediately.